All right, this is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. To begin our conversation on increasing oil production in Nigeria, here is a background report by Oyeyemi Ajayi.
Presently, Nigeria produces 1.5 million barrels of crude, and according to the chief executive of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, NNPC, Mele Kyari, the major impediment to achieving more remains the inability of players to act in a timely manner. And that explains why a state of emergency was declared on production in Nigeria's oil and gas industry, as Africa's largest oil producer struggles to boost output, believing that Nigeria needs to take urgent action to address the challenges that have plagued the industry for years. Remain oil theft and pipeline vandalism, which have long plagued the country's upstream oil and gas industry, driving major players out of the country and often resulting in force majeure at the key crude oil export terminals. Lack of investment in the capacity has made Nigeria the biggest laggard in crude oil production in OPEC Plus alliance, and due to the underproduction, OPEC even reduced the quota for Nigeria's oil production last year. Now, with the state of emergency declared, it is believed that the war will help the country and its partners speedily clear all identified obstacles to effective and efficient production, such as delays in procurement processes, which have become the challenge in the industry. Part of the moves now to make is to replace all old crude oil pipelines built over 4 decades ago and also introduce a rig sharing program with its partners to ensure that production rigs stay in the country for between 4 to 5 years, which is the standard practice in most climes. And for the Chief Executive Officer of NNPC Limited, there is the need for all the players in the industry to collaborate towards reducing the cost of production and boosting production to target levels. According to a detailed analysis of assets revealed, Nigeria can conveniently produce 2 million barrels of crude oil per day without deploying new rigs. And so, how soon will this declared state of emergency be felt by the ordinary Nigerians? Guests on the program will surely provide answers to these and more shortly.
Ajayi, thank you. We do hope that our guests will provide the solutions to the quest, of course, to boost our oil production, and we have no doubt that they have the capacity to, give us a direction. So let me quickly welcome the guests right here in the studio. And once again, our topic is on how to increase our oil production capacity in Nigeria. And we have Emeka Ene, who is the Board of Trustees, Chair of the Society of Petroleum Engineers Nigeria. Indeed, he's engineer Emeka Ene, and former chairman of PITAN, CEO of the All Data Energy Group. And we're very glad to have you live in our studio.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah.
And we also have Demola Henry Adigun, who's an energy consultant that supports energy sector in the areas of governance and capacity building. He has also supported policy development in the oil and gas sector and team leader of the Facility for All Sector Transparency and Reforms, as well as, which is, I gather, is an intervention targeted at reducing corruption in the oil sector. And you do that by promoting efficiency and strengthening governance of the sector. Quite an uphill task, if you ask me. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
All right, and let me also introduce another petroleum engineer. But he's in the academic, he's an academic rather, Dr. Abubakar Akali, who joins us and is senior lecturer at the Bayes University here in Abuja. It's a pleasure to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria.
All right, let me start with Engineer, and this morning, Victor and I, were reading out numbers of, our production capacity at the moment. We have 1.7, million barrels per day. We've heard 1.5, but there's also a report that indicates we are still at 1.2. So maybe you will start by giving us maybe clarification if you do have. Where are we at the moment?
Well, the delivery of oil is a chain. So it depends on where you're measuring it. So usually you're going to have a disparity and a variance. The bottom line is that we're not producing what we should be producing. And I think this is what the GCEO was alluding to. Potentially we should be producing more. Whether it is 1.5, 1.2 or 1.7, we are not producing what we should be producing.
That's at least at 2 points.
Beyond
Over 2 points.
I mean, you've hit it before. We're not there where we were before many years ago. That is the bottom line. And so when we get fixated on numbers, where we have to ask ourselves, where are we measuring? What are we measuring in the first place? But we tend to lose sight of the big picture. What is the whole purpose of this measurement? We are not performing optimally. We are not growing.
Is our production capacity, is it increasing? Are we recording any increment as at now?
Well, it depends on where you're measuring, what you're measuring. Yeah, OPEC has given us a 1.5 benchmark, and at times we are below that. At times we are above that. But everybody in the industry recognizes that we are not producing potentially what we should be producing. At the wellhead, we have certain production levels that are being measured. At the terminals, it's a different situation. The infrastructure is aging, so there are pipeline losses, other losses that are undocumented losses. And is, the market is not measuring it. If you go to the operator, he has his own production figures. When you aggregate them, right, they may not add up. 1 + 1 is 2. But if you have 1 + 1 and you're getting a different number, then you begin to worry.
It's the same thing we are saying.
But when you emphasize that it depends on where you're measuring from,
yes.
Should that cause the kind of disparity that we have? We're not talking about 1 or 2 or 100. We're talking about hundreds of thousands in difference.
Maybe we are asking the wrong question. And you see, it's when you start to count your pennies, when you start looking at your change, the period of say, okay, just keep the change. These days, you count your change. Why? Because there is an underlying economic desire to count all the numbers. So today, it's important that our production targets or deliverables are higher than what they have been, simply because we have an urgent need to grow our economy.
Okay, Mr. Adigo, this is our story this morning, and I'm not just reading. Nigeria National Petroleum Corporation (NNPC) Limited suggests Nigeria's oil production swings between 1.46 million barrels per day to about 1.7 million. And from what has been circulating in the media all through yesterday and all that, this was attributed to the MD of NNP, that's Mele Kyari himself, indicating an increase in our oil production capacity. How do you read what is happening?
It's a funny state. So there's capacity, which is what you can. Mm-hmm. Then there's actual, what you are. Mm-hmm. Then there's what the market receives, which is actually what really matters most. So if you can say you're producing 2 million barrels per day, you can claim 2.3 million barrels per day, but you're not producing them to go into the air. You're producing for a market. The purpose of the crude oil business is to sell, and you have to make revenue for it for Nigeria. Now, if you're producing 1.5 or 1.6 or 1.7, and the market is only getting 1.25, then what you are producing for the market is actually 1.25. So that's taking away the ambiguity of the way the figures are presented. Mm-hmm. So I can say, look, Nigeria has the capacity to produce this number of horsepower, but what does it actually bring out? So the capacity is different. And again, it's part of the problems we have when we have NNPC Limited being the person giving us the figures.
Okay.
Things haven't changed. the purpose of the PIA was to ensure that the regulatory capacity was strengthened, and then NPC moves out of the way, becomes a commercial company. Now, it's not Mr. Kiari should tell us this. It should be Komalafe telling us what the production figures are. He's the regulator. That is where the numbers should be. He has the overview of what we are producing. And this is the key concept of what has impeded the sector. When you have roles that are not clearly defined, I mean, the law is defined clearly, but in the performance of the roles, I was watching yesterday about a state of emergency, and I'm thinking, no, it's not your role. You're a commercial operator. You're not the minister, you're not policy. You do your business. Get an MPC working, get profit, make a profit making. The minister, or the ministers, as they are now, don't talk about policies. They have the overview of sector. They talk about the state of emergency. The regulator, which is both NUPRC in terms of crude oil production, talks about, okay, what we need to do to strengthen delivery. You do your work as a commercial entity. But these are the legacy problems where, part of the reasons why Nigeria's production has stifled. I must say that I heard Ejia Komolafe saying the rig count has increased. So the rig count now is 34 from 10, from 7. But rig count is good, and it's an indication of your production capacity.
But what are you reading? What are you reading in terms of, what is available, our crude oil capacity?
What am I reading?
Yes, are we experiencing, are we increasing, or we are just where we were before? Yes.
Well, we're declining. It's a decline. We suffer the decline, so there are different declines. There's decline in production, which can be occasioned by many things. Crude oil prices not being as high as they were before. There was a time in Nigeria, we had 73 rigs in Nigeria. There was a time we had 8, there was a time we had 6. And rig counts are an indicator of how much crude you're producing, because it's rigs that produce crude. And you're exploring or mining, so that's what happens. But so we're declining. But I heard yesterday that we're now 34, which means there might be growth, but it hasn't got to the market yet. So what gets to the market has not improved. Maybe there's increasing oil thefts. Maybe there's increasing vandalism on the pipelines. Maybe there's increasing leakages. I'm saying some maybes. But what the market is getting is not improving.
All right, thank you very much. Let me get Dr. Akali involved in this. Clearly, at least I think we can agree on something, that Nigeria is not performing to its capacity when it comes to oil production. We have a capacity of 2.2, but we don't get there. Now, many have attributed this to crude oil theft. And this has been for as long as I can remember. So why does it seem that the same crude oil theft cannot be dealt with for so long?
Thank you very much. I think, for me, to be honest, Nigeria can potentially produce more than 2.2 per day. I think I'm being very ambitious here. I think Nigeria can potentially produce 4 million barrels per day, if you ask me, with the right, infrastructure, with the right, framework. The problem is that, we allow these issues to, persist for too long. And I think the right commitment, the right political will has not been applied. Now, as you rightly mentioned, the major problem for me, to oil production is, the violence in the Niger Delta, is the oil theft, much more than even the cane infrastructure, because if you're talking of the cane infrastructure, you're talking of the pipelines, these are actually equipment that you can even establish their service life. You can establish the service life of a pipeline. Yes. So the problem is more to do with the violence in the Niger Delta. It's more to do with the oil theft. What have the authorities done to the oil theft menace? The NNPC, COO talked about state of emergency. Okay, that's good. At least it's a wake-up call, to say, look, there is a problem. But how do we fight this war? You see, for me, I see no reason why oil theft should not be declared as terrorism in Nigeria. For me, if we are really to giving these investors, the right confidence, oil It targets the whole nation. And this is an issue that could potentially bring down the whole country. So there should be a legislation on this. Our legislators, our federal legislators, even the executive itself, talks about oil theft. This is the major problem. It amounts to begging the question if we should continue to go. As we speak, I'm not sure. Anybody convicted of oil theft in this country. There are no specific laws on oil theft, but there are laws on election. There are laws on matters that are not as important as this. Connections to the trunk line. Every now and then, new illegal connections, new illegal pipelines, new illegal refineries are discovered. They are discovered. And the investor is there. And you expect this investor to be happy under this general state of violence and insecurity and uncertainty.
There's so many, Dr. Kari, there's so many. Oil bunkering and all that, but we will look at those issues presently. I wanted Engineer Ene to also look at, because right now we've all agreed that we are not even, we don't know whether what is in the market, is not encouraging, and I'm wondering if that is so. How are we? How will the country, realize the fund to fund the budget, the 2024 budget, which is pegged on a production capacity of 1.78 million barrels per day? What's likely to happen if at this stage we are not even making progress? Okay,
maybe I'm going to go philosophical a little bit.
No, please, calm down so that everybody...
No, I'm saying,
Yes, okay.
Actually I want to calm down. When I say philosophical, let's understand ourselves as Nigerians. I'll give you a few examples. IBP, and that's I better pass my neighbor, right? When I say I better pass my neighbor, everybody knows what I mean. If you're not Nigerian, you may not understand, right? So what does that mean? Necessity is the mother of invention. Nigerians find creative ways to solve problems that are practical, right in your face. They find a way of I better pass my neighbor. Or mouth. Oga manage it like that. Yeah. So we find ways to survive in less than the best conditions, less than perfect conditions. We find a way around it. Yeah. Or CAC, that is chop and clean mouth. Yeah. In other words, we are all driven by self-interest many times. You see, we have to understand ourselves. Yeah. And this is the reason why the Super Eagles won the Olympic thing in 1996 or something like that. Mass attack, mass defense. Let's play street football. Let's play our own type of football. So if we are going to meet our budget targets, we need to first understand that solving Nigeria's problem is the responsibility of Nigerians. It has to be. That's the only way we can survive. And that's the only way we have actually survived, by working around these problems and not thinking that our solution lies somewhere else. Yeah? So first is, if there's a problem, it's either some things that need to drop or some things you need to adopt, new things you need to adopt. Sustainability is one thing. How do we sustain growth in our industry? One of the things that we tend to ignore, one of our strengths, is local content. We see local content as a negative, but actually it's a very strong strength. And if it's such a bad thing, how come other countries are copying our model? From Ghana to Senegal to East Africa, they are copying our model. Because you're building capacity locally. And we saw it in COVID. In COVID, nobody could fly. You couldn't fly somebody in from Aberdeen or from Houston. And what happened? The industry was sustained during that period by purely local content efforts.
But these are two different, I mean, yes.
You were talking about finance now, yeah? I'll give you another acronym, PSS. Pay small, small. Everybody knows what that means. Yeah? Book me down. You see, so modularity in terms of solving our issues, finance-wise and co, is a strength. The ability to be able to walk around and build problems from a modular approach, solving the problem. If you look across the oil and gas industry, for example, we look at the PMS thing, people are talking about gas now, trying to use gas as a means for locomotion and all these things. Understand one thing, sustainability is key. Local content is a strength. Nigerian companies are all over the place. Nigerians are working in Saudi Aramco, helping them increase their production, right? And they are being treated like illegal children back home. So we need to understand that local content is actually a strength. And in other words, there's an announcement for a production war room. Local players, both from the independent producers, from PETAN, the local content group, we need to all be together to set production targets, challenge the process. And I can tell you that production will increase. That's sustainability.
What happens to Nigeria's membership? If you set your own target, is it going to be at par with the OPEC? Because OPEC has already given us a target of 1.5.
The potential, you don't need to drill new wells. The thing is that we're in a declining business. The moment you start producing a reservoir, it starts to decline on you. You didn't put the oil there, but think about it as even it's in a tank. The moment you start sucking the oil from that tank and you're not putting any new oil in, the level will start to reduce. So we're in a declining business. So you need to keep working it. We all got up this morning, we took our bath, we brushed our teeth, and for those who are not fasting, well, you ate some food. If you're not sustaining your business is going to decline faster. You will decline, you deteriorate faster if you're not eating. It's the same principle. But how for do? Again, it's another acronym if you like. Yeah, we have what it takes to sustain and grow our production internally. If you look at the last marginal bid round, yeah, the first marginal feed bid round, a lot of operators went across the world trying to raise money. I can tell you that 90% of the companies that went to production sourced the money locally and the expertise locally. I can tell you that. All the major marginal field players. So therefore they formed the IPPG. So our solution lies internally. Sustainability is very key. Security of supply is another thing. And that's linked to socio-economic impact. The distinguished professor made what he said. But if you've lived and worked in the Niger Delta, you know that the situation is more complex. There's a feeling of entitlement. And you can even argue that it is right. That the people have some quote-unquote rights. There's honor among thieves. So the truth of the matter is that if you drive from Nembe, or you can't drive, you go by boats, by canoe, from Nembe to Kolama, all across Agay, all those areas. It has not changed in 50 years, 70 years. They are producing oil. What do you want the person to do? The truth of the matter is that they feel quite right. I know an operator now discovered that around his field there were like 8 illegal refineries. What did he do? He didn't bring in the people to go and destroy. He came and discussed with them. And they said that it was costing them 88 million, 10 million naira to set up the business. And so he started negotiating with them to see how he can convert them into part of his workforce rather than burn and kill. When you burn and kill, they just relocate to somewhere else. Why? Because that's their only means of sustenance.
And that's what is happening.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, when you say entitlement, yes, but it hasn't changed in 50 years, 70 years. That's because even what is being taken by force is not going to the people, it's going to a few private pockets. And so that doesn't even give us a solution. But in any case, I do know that the PIA, came about and eventually made it to presidential assent because, it was intended to solve some of these problems. So, Mr. Adibu, I don't know if the PIA has done us that favor. Only yesterday, or 2 days ago, the President of the Senate hinted that, perhaps we are going to tinker with it if it's not serving its purpose.
The thing is, the PIA, there's no perfect law in the world. So laws are not perfect. Laws need to be
evolved, yeah.
As things happen, and the laws go around policy changes in Nigeria. So if the policies are changing, then the PIA might be reviewed. But the PIA by itself, it's a very well-written document. It's not the perfect bullet to Nigeria's problem, but the challenge is implementation. It hasn't been well implemented. A lot of provisions in the PIA are being ignored. The purpose of the investment, 21 years to get the PIA, 21 years, millions of naira and dollars and such. Then we get the PIA out, and then we dump it somewhere, right? And go back to default habits, which is the biggest problem. And I was talking about something which the PIA tried to address, what you said as well, those communities, the lack of benefits to those communities. The PIA said, okay, money is coming, there's derivation, we can't see the effects. And when you go to some communities in Niger Delta, you find out the only house there are tin roofs are people involved in illegal oil bunkering. Now the PIA said, okay, part of your revenue, keep aside through a community trust fund for those communities. So bypassing the states and the government, direct to the community. Now it's new. A lot of companies have set up their own trust funds. I know at least about 8 or 9 trust funds. So again, that will be implemented would allow the community benefit from oil. Because again, it's not oil theft is not only a function of people wanting to steal. There are economic issues as well. There's degradation and there's impact. Again, like you said correctly, if you steal oil, it doesn't go to the community. It goes to the people doing it and it supports militancy and other issues. But again, you must not take away from the fact that people there are sort of captive by the problem of Nigerian state. So the PIA is a good document. Before we start reviewing it, maybe we should implement it properly first. Now, when implement properly, one of the things I like to say is this. The PIA had 3 concepts. Set out the policy direction of Nigeria, set out who has the agenda, set out the laws implementing and the fiscal framework. Now, the fiscal framework is good. It's one of the best you can see anywhere in the world. Fiscal framework is why people decide to invest. And right now, Nigeria is one of the best fiscal framework compared to any nation. So why are they still not coming in? Because the fiscals are generous, and why are they pulling out? Well, they decided to pull out years ago, before your PIA came out. But for new investors and the patrons, it's a good area. Gas. This government has done very well on gas. This government has done quite well on gas. And gas is growing in expansion. But last point I wanted to say was this. The budget, which you mentioned, I always wonder how they set 1.7 million barrels per day, or the figures. You want to do your budget setting, you do historical facts. If you've never done 1.7, 1.8 in 7 years, on what basis did you say 1.7 million barrels per day? It's an object designed to fail. And that's where the fault comes in. You know what you can do based on your average over past 7-8 years is 1.2. Then you set a budget of 1.7. And then the irony of it is that 1.2 is not all for Nigeria, which is another thing that happens. If you do 1.2 million barrels per day, yours as a country is probably about 720,000 barrels, because other people that put money in the business will take their own oil as well. I mean, the PSCs, the joint ventures, the service contracts, so it's not all of yours. So there's a problem in that budget framework. Then the third factor is this, which is why I support engineer's point. Why are you producing crude for sales? Why? For every barrel of crude you sell out of the country, you lose over $1,000 in terms of value addition. Why don't you produce crude for development locally? have more refineries, give your refineries, supply petrol to West Africa.
But
Supply
is that not why Dangote came into this scene?
Dangote
Yes.
is an export refinery. I think people forget that fact. And I always tell people again, I say it regularly. Dangote is an export-free zone. If Nigeria is buying from Dangote, we are importing.
That's what it translates
to. It does not change the fact of the location. Dangote has an export-free zone license.
Okay.
So even when Nigeria is buying, we're buying as if we're buying from Ghana or Togo. So
is that what it is?
That's what it is. That's one thing people forget in the fact. So he being localized in Nigeria physically, it does not mean regulatory-wise, it's all that. So yes, it's a Nigerian-based company, but it is a free trade zone, and it's an export free trade zone. So Dangote will produce petrol or diesel or aviation fuel and sell to Nigeria as if we're buying from Togo or Benin Republic or Cotonou. Those were part of the agreement. Because otherwise, refineries are not that great returns. 1.1, 1.2, 0.9. It's not a very great investment. It's a marginal business. So he needed that guarantee to ensure that, well, if you're not buying right now, it's market, and he will tell you that himself. It's not Nigeria. He's selling to Europe. Aviation fuel has been to Europe. Who will sell petrol to Nigeria when petrol in Nigeria is 700, 600 naira? And when it is 1718 everywhere, it's $1 internationally. They're selling to Nigeria at 50 cents.
Because the impression we got was, we as Nigerians got was when Dangote finally comes on stream, we will have more supply of, crude and all that. And then, the price of PMS will probably crash.
The question I ask people is,
yes,
are inputs different from other people's inputs? If I sell yam in Lagos and I sell yam in Calabar, is it not the same yam I'm using? He's going to buy crude. He's bought crude. He's bought 6.5 million barrels from America in dollars.
But the private sector input is quite different from the refineries that are being managed by government.
No, it's not this. It doesn't work that way.
Huh?
In fact, Nigerian refineries, in true sense of the word, are one of the most profitable to operate anywhere in the world. And I'm talking anecdotal. I'm talking reality. The refineries margins in Nigeria are very, very high. But the point is this: the product of product prices are determined by two factors: international market prices and your foreign exchange. So if you're producing, if Dangote takes crude at $80 per barrel, puts it in the refinery, how is it going to sell it at 300 naira per liter? How is it going to sell it at international prices? It's going to sell it at the part it can price. Look, a refinery doesn't make money anymore when crude goes beyond $70. It starts making a loss. So it's a marginal business. It's very thin. So, people's expression should be dampened, and that's face reality. He will sell at the prices that are competitive, but they cannot be less than the prices that he produces them. He will not subsidize production. He's still going to buy the crude. He hasn't got the crude from Nigeria so far. Unless Nigeria sells crude to him in Naira. Now, if you sell the crude to him in Naira, where do you get your foreign exchange from?
All right.
And I don't know. Recently, Dr. Kali, we read of of appeals, from Dangote, of what the IOCs, the impacts that the IOCs are trying to frustrate his efforts and all that, and he's had to, import crude and all that. So I'm just wondering, are IOCs also part of our problem, part of the problem in this chain?
Yeah, well, I think it's something to do with competition. They are actually being, competitive. I'm not justifying it, because if you are operating, in a country, you have to go by the laws and regulations of that country. But also, on the other hand, it actually tells you the weaknesses in our regulatory system. Okay, as much as possible, the regulatory agencies should be able to shield Dangote, from these problems. But the fact is, the IOCs are actually...
when you say shield, can you expand?
Yeah, shield. What
yes.
I mean by shield is that, you see, there are laws here. There are laws. There are laws regarding, production. There are laws regarding export. And as a matter of fact, you see, based on the OPEC quota, which is 1.5, that 1.5 does not even include your your local, your domestic consumption. Yes, it is outside your domestic consumption. If you can produce, 2 million per day, okay, you can actually take that 500,000 for your domestic consumption, and then the 1.5 will be your OPEC requirement, OPEC quota. Okay, so even in that light, the regulatory agencies can actually ensure that Dangote is free from this shackles of competition from the IOCs. The fact is that it's a very weak regulatory system in the industry, such that the IOCs can now play at their own game. But to be honest, also the fact is that Dangote cannot fully rely on supply from the NNPC. He cannot rely on supply from the NNPC, and this is actually a part of the problem, because if you look at it, you see NNPC. Dangote is saying NNPC is not actually giving him the supply that he requires, and he's now moving abroad, to establish new frontiers of supply, and you can't blame him on that. The fact is, for the NNPC, you would expect that at least, they should be able to guarantee the 445, even the 650,000 barrels, possibly, because the NNPC was operating the DSDP, isn't it? The direct sales, direct purchase agreement. Now, that direct sales, under that DSDP, the NNPC was using 445,000 barrels to swap for the 64 million estimated, okay, 64 million liters estimated PMS, requirement, okay, domestic consumption requirement. Now, last year, the DSDP was stopped, isn't it? The DSDP was stopped last year.
Sale.
It was stopped, okay? So where is the 445 that the NNPC was using to swap for 64 million liters of PMS? Where is the 445?
So what I'm getting from, there is a tying of NNPC in this regard. There's a linking of NNPC.
Yeah, these are the
yes,
I was
in this
talking
regard.
about.
So is there is NNPC complicit? Because NNPC also
this is the
has.
shit I was talking about.
Yes.
NNPC cannot ensure the supply, the crude supply that Dangote needs. This is part of the shit I was talking about, and this is what actually causes further altercations, okay, between Dangote and the IOCs.
Yes.
Okay, so if the NNPC can ensure supply, that's the shit I was talking about. If the NNPC can ensure the supply, the crude supply that Dangote requires, okay, that will bring some stability in the industry. Where is the 445? I keep asking. The DSDP 445,000 barrels of crude oil, because the DSDP was scrapped. So you will expect that NNPC will now convert that 445 to Dangote.
Okay, let's put you, Mr. Adigun, you're laughing. Before, I know Victor wants to. Mr. Adigun, is NNPC complicit? Again, because we understand there is a partnership between the NNPC and the IOC in all of this.
I mean, let's be truthful about it. The IOC's frustrating me was pure propaganda by Dangote. That's not true. It's impossible. I mean, this is being real. We can play.
So it's pure propaganda?
It's pure. It's pure industrial propaganda. Nigeria operates under 4 major agreements. The PSC, right now, is the biggest where we get crude. Of every PSC agreement right now, the declining take is from the IOCs. The government gets 90% of crude production. This is how it works. The PSC, at the beginning, you get high. As it emerges, you get lower and lower. Where we are now, the PSC contracts, Nigeria gets 90 to 95% of crude produce. On the joint ventures, it's the same thing. Now, the reason why joint ventures are scattered is because the NNPC can't meet its own cash obligations. So NNPC gets to the crude. Of 1.2 million barrels produced in Nigeria today, 850,000 goes to NNPC. So who is not giving Dangote crude? Is it the IOC, who took a loan to invest in your deep water, who needs to pay it back, who has signed contracts for long-term production. So it's still NNPC, not giving Dangote crude. But again, NNPC itself is constrained by the right of economy. The agreement between NNPC and Dangote was 300,000 barrels per day as part of our own 20% investment in it. That was the contract we signed. Now, 300,000 barrels is only available after we've produced enough. But imagine Nigeria's crude has been used for taking loans. You all know about the loan we took from Afrexim Bank, the 90,000 barrels per day Project Gazelle. We're taking loans for other things. So why does NNPC itself have room to move? And remember again something, government is dependent on crude sales for revenue. So the NNPC itself is a victim of over-dependence of the government on crude sales. And I keep on using what crude sales, because not all industry. So if everybody is depending on crude sales, NNPC has to sell crude. Now, government has made a direction, every crude you sell, remember the money Central Bank of Nigeria now, don't keep the money anymore. But same NNPC has to bring in petrol at subsidized prices. You know, we keep on lying, there's no subsidy. There's a lot of lie about subsidy regimes. Everybody says, oh, there's no subsidy, but it's a lie. We all know it's a lie. So NNPC
No,
now,
we don't know. Those are your views.
No, not your views.
No, those are your views, because we're not, we once we have data to prove otherwise.
Data is
so
available.
that
Anybody can put that data. It's not even complicated. Look, NNPC brings petrol in. Nobody else brings petrol in. People bring diesel in. People bring language production for. Only NNPC is petrol for the past 7 years. Why? Because I can't bring petrol in at 10 naira and sell at 6 naira. International price of petrol today, you can Google that. $1.10, 94 cents. We're selling 50 cents. That's subsidy now. You've seen now, in the next few months, if you're not careful, there might be queues again, because the cargo sellers selling to NNPC are not selling anymore because they haven't got their money. So NNPC is burdened by the responsibility of the Nigerian state. And that's one of the things the PI tried to do, to unburden it and free from the burden the Nigerian state has put on it. It's a victim of poor regulation, poor economic governance, and a victim of its own success in the past. So everybody is NNPC. Anything NNPC. NNPC should pay for that. Where's NNPC going to get the money from?
All right. We've talked a lot about
NNPC.
where we're getting it wrong. Yeah, there. But where do we go from here? Engineer EE, I'm borrowing a leaf from you now.
Where do you go from here? That's a good one. Well, one thing is this, is again going inwards, is that we need to understand, again, coming from the engineering, pure petroleum engineering perspective, is that we are in a declining reserve. How do we boost our production at minimum cost? First, increase the pie so that we can all share. The pie is shrinking, then there's pressure everywhere. Yeah, good. So, you know, when you produce oil, you are only producing probably 30% of what is actually there. Yep. So when you say I have 100 million barrels in my reservoir, you're only going to produce 30 million barrels. The 70 million barrels are lost. So technology to optimize our production, yeah, existing production, starting with the independent producers, yeah. The first thing we need to do is to have standardization.
Good.
Yeah, standardization. That is, in other words, when you go to Total, go to Shell, go to ExxonMobil, you see there are multiple standards for the same solution. All of them have different pipelines. Interconnectivity of production doesn't happen because everybody has projects, has a budget, submits it to NAPIMS or NIMS, and then it goes that way. So the actual cost, overall cost, is high. Yeah? We talk about aging infrastructure, but the truth of the matter is that there's lack of interconnectivity in our production system, and that's adding a layer of costs and also a significant amount of losses. We talked about pipeline vandalization, but you see, if we have standardization, we have right now very few, at least where land and swamp is concerned. If we're not going to Bonny, we are going to Forcados. Yes, Escravos is on its own. But you see, it's on its own. People now barge in. Barging increases the cost significantly because of lack of infrastructure. We now talked about refining. Now, regional refiners, we talked about modular refining, which came up here. Modular refiners have had very good margins, obviously. You put in the the small modular refinery or topping plant right in the middle of your production. You're not going to transport the crude far and go near. So regionally, you should be able to satisfy the demand, the local demand, because you minimize the long-range transportation. So my point is that we need to deal with the problem from both ends of the spectrum.
But even the modular refineries we hear are not producing crude.
Well, they are not producing PMS as we know it. Yeah, okay. They are what I call topping plants. So they essentially extract part of the crude. They don't crack the crude to get your what you call PMS, but they fill a niche. They fill a very important niche, and that is where the niche that gas can fill easily. We have a lot of gas. There's a fair amount of gas flaring. You capture that gas, creates what I call transportation corridors, because the issue is that if you fill your CNG tank in Calabar, how far are you going to go before the thing runs out? So you need to create a chain of refill stations along the way. So create corridors, Calabar to Lagos, Calabar to Abuja, and where you have that, you bring the cost of your transportation and therefore reduce your demand. Reduce your demand, you now have more crude to sell to the market. So,
Engineer, you talked about increasing the pie.
Yes.
To solve a problem.
Yes.
The pie is shrinking.
Yes.
Or we're eating it up. So, to a solution, you increase it. And part of what government did was to increase the pie, in the form of granting licenses, for people to build refineries. And Dangote was one of those. Now, out of the, I don't know how many now, I think over 20 licenses granted so far, we are only hearing of Dangote. So what is happening to the other licensees? Well,
one thing is we need to commend Dangote for taking on the challenge. It's not an easy challenge. And like you talk about the refinery margins as being slim, they are actually very slim. When you add on the inefficiency in our system, you can easily argue that it's negative. So he did make the right choices in terms of making sure to de-risk his project. He had to be export-oriented, no doubt. But there is a potential huge economic spillover of having a Dangote refinery in Lekki. Yeah, people are trained, huge workforce. It helps to support the industry. If we see it as part of our overall industrial strategy for growth, rather than it is Dangote's refinery, it's his problem. We have to see it as a collective national issue. Yes, we have the export arm of our business there. How do we strengthen the regional refiners? How do we get them to start to produce into a pot for which everybody can share? The truth of the matter is, if we see it that way, you can easily see ways in which we can increase that pie. But if we see it as you're on your own, and then everybody tries to find out what is wrong and what's not wrong, he's taking a very bold and, if you like, imaginative step. You can easily argue he saw the numbers and said, listen, if there's 450,000 barrels here being swapped, let me take it and convert it into value. But Nigeria is a dynamic place. So my point is that until we begin to see the problem as collective, having an overall policy, increase the pie, utilize our local content. As I keep saying that because, of course, I come from a local content background, but they add real value. Integrate that into the IOSLs and IOCs, because they also bring value in terms of technology, in terms of even investment, finance, and co. Create modularity in gas, modularity in refining, and integrate that into a national system. We will solve the problem on the short term, and then we'll have sustainability. Yeah.
Mr. Adigun talked about what could have happened to our expectation if Dangote didn't have a free zone license. Do you think it was wrong to have obtained a free zone license?
No, it was
and
you have to have the bankability of a project. You have to have the bankability. And the key challenge is going to be, if I put this money in here, how will I get the money back? Think about it. So really, putting it in a free zone made economic sense, apart from the fact that it's a lot of heavy lifting. If you've borrowed money before, they will ask you, where's your collateral or where's the seed money? It takes some guts to do that. Now, but if we put that within the context of the overall industrial strategy, oil industry strategy, then we can see the value add of that refinery and see how it cascades into the rest of our economy. It's very important that we do that. But if we isolate these things, then we're always going to be back into the chop and clean out approach, which is everybody's self-interest, and collectively we don't make that much impact. That's true. As a nation, all I want to do is to fuel my car and move from point A to point B. Yeah, and whether the petrol comes from Dangote or comes from a local refinery, it's irrelevant. Yeah.
All right. Let me ask Dr. Akali, is there a chance that industry regulators can collectively, confront the challenges and opportunities just to shape the energy landscape?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think regulation is key. It's important, and that even brings us to this question of the sense of entitlement, which was mentioned in this program this morning. I think because there is very weak regulation, there is an overhype of this sense of entitlement. You see, this sense of entitlement is part of the reasons why the industry is declining and is not what it should be. Okay, it cannot be justified. Okay, first, the law is not on the side of that sense of entitlement, because oil is found in my backyard doesn't mean I own that oil. It doesn't. I actually studied in Scotland and I lived, for some time in Aberdeen, but I've never had Aberdonian, claiming that sense of entitlement. Aberdeen is the closest city actually to the North Sea side of the UK, where oil is found. Okay, that's where oil is found. Oil, on the UK side of the North Sea. But you cannot hear an Aberdonian or a Scottish claiming that this oil belongs to me. So, because we have weak regulation, that is why this sense of entitlement has now, started as militancy, and from that militancy, it now, blossomed into oil theft, and general insecurity. And here we are, losing about 3 million barrels of crude oil per day to that violence. Yes, as I said, Nigeria can potentially make 4 million, but here we are at 1 million, at 1.2. Okay, so the rest are being lost because of that violence, because of that sense of entitlement. So the regulators have to step up. Okay, there is, apart from the PIA, okay, which clearly, had the host community fund about 3%, isn't it? They were even asking for it to be increased to 5%. 3% host community fund. You also have the CSR, corporate social responsibility, from the companies. All these are going there. And the more they go, apart from even that, you have the Niger Delta Development Commission. You have the Ministry of Niger Delta Affairs. You have the Derivation Fund. My friend here said is going is being mismanaged. Okay, it's being mismanaged. This money does not go to the people. There are instances where a company in the Niger Delta will come to say, look, I want to do my CSR. I want to build a bridge. The leaders there will tell them. The chief there will tell the company, look, don't build any bridge. Just give me the money, because I know what my people want. You see, so that is not helping the industry. The regulators now, and this even brings us to the issue of the NNPC again. Okay, NNPC, I fully agree, and everybody, most people have been saying this, that NNPC should be unbundled. Okay, it will help the industry. It will help in checking these excesses. I really cannot understand why, when the PIA was being formulated,
into how many
unbundling the
factions?
NNPC. Well, unbundling the NNPC, at least when you have a strong standalone national oil company, okay, fully into E&P.
Okay, please just hold it there. We'll get back to continue. Can we take a short break now? We'll be right back.
Federal Government of Nigeria.
All right, welcome back to the program. Good morning, Nigeria. And I'll just allow Dr. Akali to continue, with his response.
That's what I'm saying. When you have a strong national oil company, purely into E&P, okay, now NNPC operates basically as a joint venture management company, if you ask me honestly, because almost all the fields are on joint venture. And even more worrisome is the fact that, you see, under this joint venture, NNPC is supposed to have the majority shares, but it actually sometimes even goes the other way around, and NNPC ends up having the minority shares because it's not able to actually meet up with its obligations under the contract, under the PSC or under the JV. Okay, so the unbundling I'm talking about, and as I said, I was really surprised in the PIA, maybe because NNPC sponsored maybe sponsored the formulation of the PIA. It was not touched. Only the DPR was unbundled into the midstream and downstream and the upstream. NNPC was not touched, and we need that. The unbundling I was talking about is we should have a gas company of the NNPC and an oil company on the NNPC, because you see the commitment, of the government in the gas sector, 209 trillion cubic feet of gas. That's huge. The reserves. Nigeria has huge reserves, of gas, but the infrastructure is not there. Okay, 37 billion proven reserves of oil. Okay, second in Africa and 10th in the world based on oil reserves. But you see, all these things are not being harnessed. Okay, because the national oil company, which is the hub, okay, is not standing strong. The NNPC should be unbundled. There should be a gas company, okay, and the national oil company, so that we can have more production, capacity. We can enhance the production capacity of the NNPC if we have a strong national oil company, purely committed to E&P. We have one actually, the MPDC, but is it really working? Is it really working? Is it really performing? So I think to have a repositioned industry, you have to start with the NNPC. You need to get it right with the NNPC. This rationalization, this restructuring or redesign, whatever we may want to call it, should start from the NNPC.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Akali. Let me ask the engineer here. I don't know why I lost your name. You are not an engineer, that's why. Because I lost your name, Mr. Adibu. But what is it? If we are talking about restructuring the NNPC, what is it about the NNPC that is not going well? What is, for instance, the Saudi Aramco doing that the NNPCL is not doing? Because you look at the figures in 2022 Q1, Saudi Aramco posted a gross revenue that is about 5,307% more than the NNPCL's revenue for the same Q1 2022.
Well, let me defend NNPC. And I would say this with all sense of responsibility. Given the circumstances NNPC is operating under, it is doing well. NNPC has been unbundled. But let me say something. One of the things the PI did was put NNPC under KAMA. So NNPC right now is a KAMA company. The shares are held by MOPI, Ministry of Petroleum Incorporated, and MOFI, Ministry of Finance Incorporated. So it's purely a commercial company by design and regulation, and it's under KAMA. But there's a legacy issue of NNPC being a petty cash account for all our presidents and all our leaders. NNPC has set petty cash accounts from 1978 to date. That no company can operate profitably under that condition. no matter how intelligent you are, no matter how good you are, no matter the structure. If you are going to be asked to do things that are not in line with your mandate, let me give you a simple example. Some months ago, the government said NNPC should not remit the money sold, good sales money should be sent to central bank. Under KAMA, that is illegal. It might be good for governance, but how do you start a corporation of funds and expect it to be profitable? The same NNPC, as I said earlier on, you are asking to import petrol at cheaper than sale price. They've been doing this for 7 years. NNPC has been carrying the burden of subsidy, of petrol subsidy, for the past 7 years in Nigeria. I'm not exaggerating, these are figures you can find in their figures. How can they contribute to Aramco? Then when you talk about Aramco is doing, Saudi Arabia does 10 million barrels per day at $9.10 as COP. Cost of production in Nigeria can range from 28 to 34 or 18, depending on the field you're thinking. So NNPC, under circumstances, is not doing badly. I'm not saying it's profitable. And I agree totally with Prof that the NNPC is part of the problem. And the problem is not the law in this case. The laws are enough.
Implementation.
It's the perception of the law and how even NNPC perceives itself. Every time I say publicly or anywhere that NNPC thinks it's a regulator, or I get challenged, or what do you mean we issue regulations? But you do. When I talk about a state of emergency in crude oil production, it's not your job. You're a commercial company, but you take the burden. Everybody still sees NNPC as NNPC without limited. Of the past.
Now you are limited. You are NNPC limited.
And you should be under a regulator.
It should be under a regulator. Okay, let's quickly look at, because the purpose of our conversation is to see how we can, the roadmap to increasing our production capacity. And there are quite a number of things that are draining, our input. Oil theft is part of it. And oil theft, again, we're looking at aging facilities and all that. So what can we quickly do to the issue of oil theft?
Okay, it's a good question. And, I think oil theft, as in so many other very, I would say, illegal activity, is not just an event, it's a chain. It's a system, It's a system of give and take. But I'll give you an example. About 10, 12 years ago, 14 years ago, when the first marginal fields came up, there was a marginal field operator that went a different way. Then it was very popular to sign an MOU and do CSR. And this marginal field company said, you know what, let's do a trust fund. Yeah. Now, it took about 3 to 5 days of engagement with the community. They brought all the levels of the community, all the stakeholders, from market women and co, to a room in a hotel, and they spent almost a week convincing them that the trust fund was going to benefit them more than a cash and carry business. You see, where you just build a town hall and co. They resisted it, but eventually they signed the agreement. Now, I tell you that operator has had no shutdown. No single shutdown in 14 or 15 years. Not one. There is a trust fund. They created a company for the community. The youths are there. There's competitive bidding. And when the last time I know they were opening, cutting tape, yeah, the number of projects that have come up, the community has street lights, has tarred roads, has schools, it's amazing. Now, at the time that this company was signed this agreement, all the other operators in the neighborhood called this company and said, don't do it, you're going to create problem, it's going to be blah, 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 blah. But today, there are no issues. There is a conflict resolution committee populated by the thing. There's an independent judge, retired judge, who is the chairman of the trust fund. The money goes at source into that account. When the PIA was passed, the community came, that was the first protest they came. Please, leave us with our trust fund, because what they were getting from the trust fund was better, more defined than what was in the PIA.
So invariably,
yes,
that addressed the issue of thieving of our oil.
Why? Because when there's less oil produced, their money reduces in their trust fund. So when anybody tries to bunker, the community is the one who
take responsibility. They take ownership of that.
That is it.
But is that really happening? Because the individuals who do this look at what comes to them. They don't care about the trust
No.
fund.
You see, we're all from the village. Yeah. Let's face it. You know, so even if you're in town, you're from the village. You know what it means. There is a communal psyche that will stop these things from coming. When the people who bunker come to a particular area, you know the first thing they do? They bring rice, milk, and drop it in the village square. It's an economic force. It's not. They don't go. You say they go and take for themselves. They don't. They help to spread the local economy. They give food. They help to sustain. So the community gives them cover. This is the thing. The community gives them cover to do what they're doing.
So have they stopped giving cover since the trust fund was set up?
No. My point is this: is that the community knows the individuals who are involved in this thing. They tell them, please avoid this area. Why? Because the money will reduce if they bunker. If they shut down, the trust fund shuts down. So there's a collective ownership
of that.
Of
and
this
whether Victor, the point you're trying to say is, I mean, at least it reduces to the barest minimum.
Yes.
You know, the issue of oil theft within that.
I'm just worried that the figures haven't increased.
That's the principle of the host community.
That's right.
That's what we adopted into the PIA. Yes. What he said. I know the company is talking about, and he's not exaggerating. You see, the point about the theft in Niger Delta is not based on one issue alone.
Yes.
But the socio-economic issues, which is the biggest issue. I went to one community. I was telling them about dangers of crude thefts and about using crude for things. One man told me, they said, "Na person with their alive, they get disease." Now that sank home to me. That was my first involvement. This was 2008-07 of going to this community. And I realized, I said to me, any house you see here, we get tin roof. Now people will steal. If people feel impact, they are more inclined to safeguarding the assets. And like you said, in those community bill as well, in the PIA, it works on the principle of the more they produce, the more you benefit. So it's in your interest to protect. And you see, this community you've been around too, they're interconnected. A pipeline doesn't just go from space into space. It goes through communities. For it to be broken and everything, a community has to give an accent.
Precisely.
There's that thing of folding your hands and looking. It's the same thing with all bands of terrorism we have, as Prof said. So the law is there to deal with it, but it's one part of it. The second issue is what we're trying to do now. You must bring investments. You held on investments because you said the idea is to increase crude oil production. When a country says we're tinkering with our laws, like we did in Nigeria, 21 years to pass a PIA, nobody can plan on uncertainty. If I'm asked to develop a model for anybody, and then I don't know what the fiscal laws will be, or what the tax will be and other issues will be, I won't be able to tell an investor how much returns will be. So we've dealt with that now. Fiscals have been passed now. It's been dealt with. But then there's the whole investment climate again, which is beyond what we are doing. I am happy. When I was coming here today, I read that the Ajip Owando deal has been concluded. We're waiting for Seplat, Mobil, we're waiting for Renaissance, Shell. The more investors realize I can put my money in and put my money out, the better for us. And like engineer said, Nigeria is a country where we have the capacity to run the industry. What we don't have, it might be the finance, but capacity in terms of technology, capacity in terms of production, we have all that locally. So the more local people get into the space, the more people divest. I don't worry about that. Nigeria's export capacity to countries in the world. There are very few countries where you go to in oil and gas. He was in Aberdeen. Aberdeen has a lot of Nigerians. It's the first de facto place you go for a master's in oil production. But if you talk about Aberdeen, for instance, UK's dependence on crude is 1.3%. For Nigeria, for foreign exchange is 90%. For revenue is 38%. That dependence is what creates this socioeconomic problem. So we're all caught up in a circle.
Okay, let's quickly look at another issue again, which is loss, all loss apart from the oil theft, because of mode of transport. And you talked about what really gets to the market, and which is insufficient. And that's because somewhere along the line, some are stolen or some are missing and all that. And I was reading recently where the, CM, Mele Kyari, was talking about barging, thinking about, using barges as a way of transporting an crude. I don't know what you think. He said it's not normal, but in other climes, it's one of the ways, of transporting crude. What do you think, Dr. Akari?
Yeah, it's actually one of the options, obviously. But you think you see the aspect actually there is. I think the major problem there, part of the problem is the metering system. Okay, the metering system is a big problem in the industry because you find out that you have actually staff, you have the regulators, representatives, at the wellhead, but you actually find out that what comes out, the recorded production is not consistent. It's not actually what is produced. Okay, so there is a very big problem with the metering system, and I think that is one area that the country is shortchanged, if you like, by these operators. Okay, so and apart from that, also, you see, as I said, most of the fields are actually operated under PSCs, under joint ventures. So you find out that the NNPC doesn't really have control over this production. Now, if you are in a joint venture with someone, okay, 60-40, for example, at least you should be able to know the production. Okay, you should be able to have your own figures of what that operator produces. Okay, you should be able to say, okay, look, this is, and that is why you have your representative at the wellhead, who monitor this metering, who monitor this output. Okay, now that output is faulty. That metering system is faulty. Okay, is even manipulated, by the way, or it's not even done. Okay, and you now want to build that operator. How do you build the operator when you don't know what he is producing? NNPC, cannot, in all, sincerity, be able to establish the daily, a dependable daily production, figure for these operators. They cannot. What actually happens is the operator simply, comes to say, look, I have, this is what I produce, or this is your commitment, and this is what I've done. NNPC signs and says, okay, you understand. So at the end of the day, that 60-40, as I was saying initially, that 60-40, 60 for NNPC, 40 for the company, actually goes the other way. NNPC now takes 40 or 30, because NNPC is not meeting up with obligations. So there is a very big problem with the metering system, and unless we do something about it, we will not be even able to establish our own court in the JV, because we don't know. NNPC cannot establish, doesn't know what these operators are producing.
And that's why we're having conflict.
I wanted to ask, just before, because we're almost out of time, is there now, since we are talking metering now, is there a place for technology in the value chain, across the value chain of oil production, as a way of mitigating theft, reducing it, to the barest minimum, and increasing production therefore?
Yes, in terms of metering, the whole metering thing is a handshake, fiscalized from one to the other, and eventually gets to the terminals that you have. There was a discussion of the barging thing. Barging is because of the toll gates. Just like to drive on your roads, it takes you 2 weeks to get to Maduguri from Lagos, because of the many toll gates. And both virtual toll gates and real toll gates. You understand what I mean? Yeah. So that is why barging is expensive. Yeah, because there are so many toll gates. For an operator to barge from one point to another, they're going to settle militants, they're going to settle community, they're going to settle navy, they're going to settle the roadways transport, they're going to settle so many things. So by the time you add up the numbers, it becomes untenable. There was an operator that was badging to Esclavos for many years. They were producing not too much, but they were successfully doing those badging. But because badging becomes an issue or a solution to a problem, you don't have a pipeline is broken. You have to find a way to get your truck to market. So it's a symptom of the overall challenge. Metering, there have been many initiatives. The old DPR launched it. NNPC has their own metering thing, virtual satellite monitoring. All of those things are there. But the basic fiscalization methodology, for example, in the DPR, old DPR, NUPRC, NNDPRA guidelines, is simply down to a dipstick. If I move barrels from here to there, I'll check where it started from, I go to that end and check what arrived there, and then I reconcile the numbers. But if you think about it, a lot of our infrastructure is not optimized. It's very significant, I can tell you that, because most of the IOCs build their own networks in parallel to each other. So you have Ajip and Total in the same neighborhood. One is going one direction, the one is going in a different direction.
So we can't take deliberate steps.
The shell fields go to Bonny.
Technology?
Ajip, you can optimize easily. Last week, somebody was trying to add some numbers. They were doing an inventory. And he says, it's taking us 1 week to do it. And I said, wait a minute. He said, let me show you something. Give me your paper where you have written all the numbers, added everything. I took a picture of it. And I asked the AI model, see, please convert these things into numbers. And there I showed him what was taking 1 week was taking a few seconds. AI or whatever can optimize our production infrastructure. Plug it in and it will optimize it.
All right. I think it's a fine place to leave the conversation, but this conversation never really ends because the issues keep staring us in the face. For today, well, let me thank you, Engineer Emeka Ene, who is BOT Chair of the Society of Petroleum Engineers of Nigeria, and former Chairman of PITAN and CEO of the Oil Data Energy Group. We thank you very much for coming on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you for having me. Thanks.
Let me also thank Mr. Ademola Henry Adigun, an energy consultant that supports the energy sector in the areas of governance and capacity building, and has supported quite a number in terms of policy development in the oil and gas sector. We thank you. Thank you for your time and thoughts.
Thank you very much.
Let's also thank Dr. Alkali, Dr. Abubakar Alkali, who is a petroleum engineer and a senior lecturer at the Bayes University here in Abuja. We thank you for coming on Good Morning Nigeria. All right, that's the program. This is where we have left it off today. Tomorrow is another day. We urge you to enjoy your day while thanking you for joining us.
And I'm Claire Adelabu Abdul Razak. I thank you very much for joining us, and I particularly want to say thank you to Amedu Michael. Please keep spreading the good news about the NTA until they can't beat the rich. Bye-bye.